Hello, everyone. I'm Ma here from WARP7, and I'm the Director of Operations. And this is our seminar on sponsorship acquisition with Junior Brempog. I want to do a quick land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Some quick seminar logistics. All seminars will be recorded and accessible on our website at warp7.ca/seminar series. All participants will be muted with their cameras off, and questions shall be only asked through the chat. And you can just send your questions to the person named Ask Questions here anytime you want, as we will be saving them until the end. Upcoming seminar dates. Next week on December 1st, we have a budgeting seminar with someone from Wealthsimple, and then our final seminar on December 8th will be paying for post-secondary with another person from Wealthsimple. You can access our previous seminars on our YouTube channel or on our website. And now I would like to introduce Junior Brempog from Wealthsimple Foundation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Junior, and I am the head of our community and corporate partnerships with Wealthsimple Foundation. I am very much have been involved in the community and the corporate partnership industry for, I would say, going upwards of 5 years now, working more so on the corporate side and now a little bit more on the nonprofit sector with the foundation. Super excited to be here and sort of dive into a little bit more around this partnership, the relationship that we've been able to form with Western Tech, and sort of how Mahir has made this all happen. So excited to be here and answer any questions that you might have.
So I want to quickly talk about how we became partners with the Wealthsimple Foundation. It all started at the end of July, where we discovered the Wealthsimple Foundation, and we saw a connection between their core values of financial literacy and paying for post-secondary, and our values of financial literacy and helping students become better throughout their high school years and be better students in post-secondary. And we looked around on their website and we found their contact information. And then next month, in the beginning of August, we worked together as a team with mentors and other people, writing and drafting a letter to Wealthsimple. We showed our core values of financial literacy and post-secondary education, and I personalized my connection with Wealthsimple Foundation as one of their subsidies or one of their companies that they sponsor. Pathways, I use their program a lot for TTC tickets and tutoring, and I had that connection with Wealthsimple Foundation. A couple of days after, we got a response back, setting a date for a meeting in September. A couple of questions for Junior that I had was, how important in the letter was booking the meeting?
Yeah, I would say that that's super important. I think the initial outreach letter to any corporation or any foundation is going to sort of set the precedence for what the scope of the relationship is going to look like. And I think that having some sort of call to action or a CTA, so to speak, is super beneficial. For me, I'm constantly sort of bombarded with different emails from different players in the community wanting to sort of form a partnership. So I think being able to highlight it from the beginning and set up a meeting from the outset, always a great step from the beginning.
How important was it to you that we shared this personal information, such as my Pathways connection and stuff like that?
Yeah, I would say that that's probably one of the biggest drivers as to sort of why we entered a partnership. At the end of the day, corporations, behind them, people are still people. If there is a level of an emotional appeal, if there's a level of vulnerability, I would say, that you're able to share with the organization that sort of creates buy-in, so to speak, I always think that's a really great step. Even in my experience, when I dealt more on the outreach side and reaching out to corporations and community, it was always sort of sharing what my personal relationship was with the organization that sort of created that initial conversation. And it's always nice to sort of have someone who sort of knows a little bit about the organization when you're going to enter a partnership. So I think sort of highlighting where the paths intersected was quite appealing for me, at least on the partnership side of things. And yeah, I think that is super important to sort of share your personal tie with the organization and sort of what the value proposition is.
That's interesting. Moving on to the month of September, during the middle of September, we went into a meeting with Wilsonville Foundation with Junior and another member from their team, and we pitched them our proposal of what we wanted from them and what they can get, or the benefits they can receive from us, as well as setting up a way to communicate with them in the future. They at the end of the meeting, they agreed to become a partner with us and be the title sponsor for the seminar series, like the one you're participating in now. What about your first impression of our team in the beginning of the meeting, or what was your first impression of our team?
You know, I think my first impression upon meeting the team was that everyone was a go-getter. And I think that in the industry, that's something that I can very much appreciate. The philosophy that I sort of like to live by is that the only goals that you're certain to miss are the shots that you don't take. And I think that this was very much a real life example. And I think a lot of the onus sort of falls on you, Mihir, like being able to reach out and sort of establish that relationship. There's a lot of big corporations that haven't even taken that step. So I think that we were super keen to sort of be involved because of the commitment that we could see from the beginning. And sort of putting your best foot forward and really having that confidence. I think that was a really, really key part as to why we wanted to pursue the partnership and why we wanted to help out as much as we could. And yeah, I think that my impression of the team was everyone was like very keen to be involved and everyone was very willing to be collaborative with it, which I love. And everyone has been very, very great communication wise, and there's been no complaints. Everyone's been great.
During that initial meeting, how did your interest level change because I was leading the presentation compared to an adult?
Yeah, in full honesty, yeah, I would say that I don't know if it necessarily changed, but I think my perspective shifted. Because one, the overall scope of the partnership sort of changes based off of like who your point of contact is going to be. And I think that sort of just pertains to any type of partnership. For instance, we could be talking to someone who's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and the framework that we're going to enter that conversation is going to look a lot different than maybe we're speaking to someone who works more in like middle management. Like it's always going to shift. But that being said, I think that it was probably one of the biggest draw to the partnership was that the fact that it was a student who was the one who was actually reaching out. And again, I really like the idea of just like putting your best foot forward and like taking the initiative and the drive to do so. And yeah, I wouldn't say it necessarily so much completely changed my perspective, but I think it definitely sort of changed or contextualized the way that we would go about having the conversation.
That's pretty interesting. What about us focusing on financial literacy for high schoolers did you find the most interesting or the most appealing?
I think that like a lot of the times when we sort of talk about finances, in all honesty, it's a bit too late, right? Like I think that when folks are just entering university, when folks have wrapped up debt from their post-secondary education, and we're sort of talking about ideas of money management and budgeting and investing, we're sort of hitting the topic a little bit too late. All of these students who are going to be pursuing post-secondary education or whatever that's going to look like, you're all in the position to sort of make those beneficial steps to your future right now. And I think that a really big learning through my career has been, I wish that I would have adopted some of the mindset that I have now going into my 30s as I could as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and sort of really giving you the tools and the knowledge to sort of make an informed decision yourself and carry those conversations in the home. Some of you might actually have younger siblings, and like the sooner you're in the conversation, the better, because finances are always going to be something that is predominant in everyone's life. And yeah, I think that being a part of a high schooler's journey with money and budgeting, I think it's super important. And hopefully we're able to give you a little bit of knowledge and insight as you're getting ready for post-secondary.
I agree with that statement. Being as someone who joined the conversation earlier about financial literacy and money management as well through our robotics team, I feel like get a better sense of how money works in society. Now I'm going to be opening up our floors to our audience. If you have any questions for us, just send them through the chat. Here's one question. If we are a smaller team, should we reach out to bigger corporations or should we only be connecting with smaller businesses?
You know, it sort of depends on like what your overall objective is, right? And this sort of is applicable to like a whole bunch of different scenarios. But even for us, like with Wealthsimple and the foundation, we really have two overall objectives. And one is really about like raising awareness and building trust within the community. And the other is really about scalability and being able to grow at rapid speed. And I would say that the first objective actually lends itself more to smaller organizations, because how do you build trust? You have to be involved and you have to be collaborative. When it comes to speed and being able to scale something and institutionalize something, that's sort of more when you would reach out to corporations, I think. But it sort of depends on what your overall objectives are. I think that for each strategy, there's going to be sort of different partnerships that are going to ladder back up. But you know what? I'm a huge advocate that, you know, if you don't ask the question, you won't get an answer. So, you know, sky's the limit. Like I would like to consider us like a rather big corporation, and we're in the conversation. So I think that if we're able to do it, I think that there's a lot of other a lot of companies and organizations that would be willing to do so as well.
A question that I got I think I can answer this one, is what are the shared values between WARP7 and the Wilsonville Foundation? One of the main core values that I've seen that are shared between us is the topic about financial literacy and informing youth about us like gaining more financial literacy, such as budgeting and paying for post-secondary. Another core value I saw was helping students improve themselves for post-secondary. WARP7, we want to create like well-rounded students with multiple skills, and Wealthsimple Foundation wants to help with that as well.
Yeah, like I think the conversation around finances, I think sometimes it can be like a bit static. I think we sort of talk about it in the sense of, oh, here's investing or here's cryptocurrency. But I think more so what's needed than not, especially when you're a student, is a more holistic approach when talking about finances, being all encompassing, because so many different areas and so many different topics in finances are intermingled, right? Like when we talk about investing, cryptocurrency is actually so inherently tied to investing, but they're often very much thought of as two separate entities. So yeah, I think that like having a more holistic approach in regards to financial literacy, being able to share that knowledge and also making it in a digestible way that we know that you'll be carrying on the conversations at home and hopefully with your peers and your future colleagues, I think that's super, super important. And yeah, hopefully what we can do is sort of provide that content and also be a resource for anyone who has any questions. And that's why we have access to a portfolio management team who are there to sort of guide folks on their financial management and sort of support their families in any question they might have in regards to what investing might look like, what savings might look like, and be more in the nitty-gritty conversation.
Wilsonville Foundation is connected to a technology company. Did it matter to did it matter that WARP7 was a robotics team, or were you mostly interested in the financial aspect, a financial literacy aspect?
To be honest, I quite like that it was tied to a sort of STEM derivative. Like we are a tech company and we actually have a lot of folks who work for the organizations who are engineers who all come from a STEM background. I think that that was definitely like a connection. I don't think it necessarily was like the deciding factor. I think that probably the most prominent factor was the financial literacy piece, but I like the connection to STEM and I like the connection to math and science because I think that that's super important, and anything that we can do to sort of to further that conversation in those communities, I'm super keen to get involved. But I wouldn't say it was the deciding factor, so to speak.
Oh, that's really nice. Thank you. How interchangeable is budgeting for a team or business and that is tied to current, okay, let me just rephrase that. How interchangeable is budgeting for a team or business led to personal financing?
Um, you know, like with budgeting, there are so many different factors and there are so many different areas that sort of come into play. I would say for the most part, probably the best answer to your question is that I don't think that it's something that's super finite. I think that it's something that's quite collaborative and iterative. It sort of goes based on what the needs of like the partnership is, sort of goes the needs of based up like what's being discussed between like the key players in the situation. Um, and I think that there's a lot of flexibility. At least there is on my end. I can't speak for like every corporation, but for us, I'd like to think that there was flexibility and wiggle room to play around, sort of depending on the inherent need of like the community that we're looking to support or the organization.
That's besides financial literacy, when we pitched our matching core values, we also pitched that that the company that you are the foundation for is a disruptor in the technology field, and that first robotics participants and students are also disruptors and future leaders. How important was that? How important was that shared value?
Yeah, no, I think that that's super important. Wealthsimple has made it, I feel like, quite known that who their target consumer is pretty much millennials and sort of like the age bracket from like 16 and upwards, because they're the future of wealth, right? Like they're the next generation of finances. So being able to be in conversation with students from an early age is definitely, I think, super beneficial. And I would be lying that it sort of didn't hype us up, so to speak. We like the concept of make we like the concept of our product being out there and it resonating. So yeah, I think it's always nice to sort of butter up who you're pitching to. So that was great, and I like that it was a value that was very aligned with sort of what we're doing and what our mandate is. So there was a lot of synergy. And I think that synergy is sort of what produces like a really solid partnership, knowing that your foundations are quite aligned. And yeah, I quite enjoyed the fact that there was a lot of parallels with the thought process around Wealthsimple, which was nice.
Thank you for your answer. This question is not specifically towards sponsorship, but more about like investing.
Mhm.
Many people don't feel comfortable with cryptocurrency. Does the government stand behind it?
You know, crypto is a very elusive concept and it's a very elusive construct. The government, for the most part, in full legality, like transparency, doesn't 100% stand behind it. But I also think that the government isn't necessarily the thought leader when it comes to being super inventive and disruptive in the marketplace. And I believe I read an article today that it's the first time that an NBA player decided to take his entire salary and actually have it moved into cryptocurrency. So there are changes that are happening in a whole host of different industries. My biggest suggestion to learning about crypto is one, find an influencer that really resonates with you. There are several that are on YouTube. There are several that are sort of just in the industry and in the space, and sort of like have sit down and sort of like chat and discuss about it. Wealthsimple is like a really great tool. We have Wealthsimple Crypto, but by no means like are we the end all be all in regards to it. And the interesting thing about crypto is that like I feel like people think, oh, I need so much money to just dump into crypto. You can essentially just sort of choose whichever currency you're interested, gain a little bit of knowledge and sort of play around with it. That's the sort of fun part. It doesn't have to be something as super extensive or as much of a juggernaut as people think. But yeah, like the government, I would say, doesn't fully support it, but I think that a lot of other industries are sort of making it almost their mandate moving forward.
That was a helpful answer. Thank you, Junior. What level of professionalism do you think is required as youth reaching out to companies?
Um, definitely in any setting, you want to try and put your best foot forward in regards to professionalism. That being said, and I think sort of circling back to your question prior around sort of, did my perspective change knowing that it was going to be a student who was like sort of leading this initiative or this activation? I think that we as like corporations also almost have an obligation to sort of have a specific framework when we're sort of in conversation with students and we're in conversation with young folks, just because of lived experience, and that's going to always be taken into account. So I don't think you necessarily have to be wearing a suit and tie every time you're speaking to a corporation. But that being said, I think sort of conducting yourself in a professional manner, knowing that a partnership is very collaborative and that you sort of need to have that foundation of trust. And I feel like the foundation of trust can be a bit rocky when one of the parties isn't necessarily showing up the way that they should. But yeah, like you're still a student and you're still a young person. That doesn't take anything away. I think just making sure that you're being communicative and you're being transparent with your partner, I think that's all that we can ask on the other side.
When you are working with a partner, what do you like them to do during execution that makes you want to continue working them or working with them for greater than 1 year?
Um, probably the most impactful thing I would say that a partner can do for me to reassess the validity of the partnership moving forward is one of two things, actually. It is one, the level of communication that they're able to offer throughout the process. I like a partner that is going to be super responsive and collaborative in the process, someone that I know that if something hits the fan, we can be adaptive. I'm not super keen on partnerships where there is like a 72-hour turnaround time from an email when we have an activation that's supposed to be happening in the following week. So just making sure the level of communication is there. And then I think towards the end of the partnership, it's really assessing what was the impact, the general impact that happened. So the audience reach, the level of engagement that happened, sort of what were the misses in the area of opportunity. And I think that sort of at least lets me know, okay, this is what we were able to achieve. Did it measure up back to what we sort of set out at the beginning and what our objectives were? And if it did, hey, that's great. I can see us moving forward. If it didn't, maybe it's a matter of reassessing and figuring out those more granular details. But for the most part, level of communication and then the overall impact of the activation.
Thank you, Junior. That was a very detailed answer. Is there a point when an organization, in this case our team, should stop trying to contact you because you aren't just interesting? What is the difference, or as an example, what is the difference between eager and annoying for a corporation?
You know what? That is a very good question because it's a very fine balance, in all honesty. I to my point earlier, I really like the idea of someone being a go-getter, and I really like the idea of someone like hitting the ground running and being like, hey, this is what we can do, this is our value proposition, so on and so forth. But there is a point where like you sort of have to take into consideration capacity. And I think that's probably the biggest issue with that line, that some organizations or some like, especially community partners, don't quite understand the scope of an organization's work. And they sort of think, oh, we're the only partnership that you have, or we're the only organization that you should be working with. So I'm going to email you X amount of times a day to make sure that this happens, this happens, and this happens. And although I'm super in favor of a high level of communication, it does sort of go a little bit far beyond at that point, because I'm held to different responsibilities and different like key players throughout the process. So just making sure that you sort of set the expectation from the beginning with your partner, saying, hey, like, this is how we're going to manage our communication together. And sort of this is how we're going to be able to work collaboratively together. And I think that once you sort of establish that from the beginning, you sort of have your standard, you sort of have your benchmark. So there's no surprises or rocky roads along the way. And you sort of don't fall into the more annoying bracket as opposed to the more audacious bracket, so to speak.
Hopefully I'm not hitting the annoying part of that bracket.
You're A-okay.
What do you like to see as a debrief on a program or status report?
I like to see someone who doesn't just paint a pretty picture. And there's something that like we commonly use in the industry called like vanity metrics. And very much that's sort of alluding to the idea of like, wow, look at how many people looked at this and looked at how many people did this and this and this. I also want to know like where the areas of opportunity are, and I want like full transparency and visibility. That's something that I try to do on my end as well, because nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? I think the hardest thing that I had to reconcile entering the partnership space was that nothing's ever going to go the way that I want it to. But if I'm the most transparent and visible that I can be throughout the process, it establishes a level of trust that I know will carry forward the partnership. So just like making sure that you have like those metrics, of course, because we want to be able to measure the impact and the effectiveness, but at the same time, being able to share, hey, this is what didn't go so well, and this is what we'd like to improve the next time. Because it also is a learning for me. We're different audiences, right? We have different trains of thought. I'm in the business wanting to learn as much as I can about your organization, as much as you're trying to learn about mine. So sharing those details, I think, are quite crucial.
Final question for today. How else is WARP7 and Wealthsimple Foundation working together?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking to do is we're sort of looking to embed some of our content into some of the financial literacy series that you currently have going on. And I believe on December 8th, we will actually have one of our engineers be joining the conversation to sort of lead funding post-secondary, Sam, who is great. And I believe that she has already formed a relationship with some of your peers. And yeah, we're sort of excited to sort of steer that conversation, provide any content that might seem relevant to financial literacy. And then again, of course, carry on the conversation to the new year and sort of seeing what that partnership can look like and how it might shift and pivot. Hopefully, given COVID restraints, it might look a little bit different. It might actually not be a virtual setting. But again, it's a very iterative and collaborative process, but we're definitely open to having it and sort of seeing what the new year takes us after this sort of block of programming is done.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening today. And I would like to thank Junior again for spending time out of his busy day to join us for our seminar series.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.